I'm based, and quite a number of us are based in the Centre for Human Brain Health, which is a new centre at the University of Birmingham. This building was opened last year, at the start of last year, and it's got a range of different equipment within it that can be used for sleep, and it can be used for other things as well. But I try to push everyone that really they should be thinking about whether or not they can use some of this equipment for sleep as well. And I guess compared to Sleep Institute in São Paulo, we don't have that many sleep labs. We have 2 sleep labs, and they are it's all about we don't do any clinical work. It's only research work, but we do have quite a lot of people who are interested in different disorders, so for research purposes, but actual clinical work we don't do. In terms of sleep research specifically, what we've tried to do, and this is under the efforts of Brendan and Bernard and a number of other people, to try and bring together sleep researchers in the region to try and just make sure that there's plenty of people there who can share their experience and share their expertise. So we've started this Midland Sleep Group, which kind of, I guess, grew out of the interactions between the Centre for Human Brain Health and the local hospitals, and has really tried to consolidate that and bring people together. In terms of the interests that people have, we've got a number of hospitals around the area that have sleep clinics, and so obviously in terms of the research that people within the sleep group are interested in, various aspects of sleep medicine. So whether that's, I mean, to be honest, I would guess there's someone who's interested in virtually all sleep disorders from some degree. There's a lot of work with sleep-related breathing disorders at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in particular, and at Heartlands Hospital. And then we also have the Barbary National Centre for Mental Health, where a lot of the time it tends to be the more kind of neurological area of sleep disorders, the insomnias, REM behavioural disorder, things like that. So within the area and within the group, there's quite a lot of people who come explicitly with expertise within sleep medicine and questions about sleep medicine. We then have people who are interested, I guess, more in the sleep physiology and electrophysiology. So whether that's physiology from the point of view of the respiratory side of things, or whether that's from trying to understand the electrophysiology and what's happening within the brain in relation to sleep. Now that does lead into a lot of people who are interested in sleep from the side of cognition, and particularly memory, and Bernard's expertise in particular are in relation to memory consolidation during sleep, and really trying to work with various techniques, trying to understand a little bit more about what aspects of sleep are important for what aspects of memory. We have people who approach sleep from neurodevelopmental disorders, and that really, I think that work started off from, I guess, the observation that a lot of the sort of rare genetic syndromes in children, that is the basis of that work, that those children have a lot of sleep problems, and those sleep problems have knock-on effects in terms of behavior. And it's really to try and understand a little bit more about that and to see what can be done to mitigate that. We've got people interested in sleep from the point of view of psychiatry, and projects going on in terms of looking at sort of suicidality and sleep. And I guess with the Institute for Mental Health, which I'll talk about in a minute, then we have people coming at sleep and an understanding of sleep from really the recognizing, again, the importance of sleep for mental health generally, pretty much, I guess, kind of whichever mental health aspect you might be interested in. At some point, sleep might well be important. There's people trying to understand that. And I guess a lot of what I do is more approaching it from the neuroimaging point of view, of trying to develop methods that can be used to understand human sleep, sort of non-invasive methods that can be used to understand human sleep, whether that is actually during sleep or in relation to kind of waking function, but linking that with habitual sleep patterns measured with actigraphy. So I think within the group, and it's relatively new, we've not had this up and running for that long, maybe the last year or 18 months. There are quite a lot of people who have interest in sleep from a broad range of areas. In terms of sort of the collaborations that we have in the local area, I've talked about the Institute for Mental Health and the Cerebral Centre for Neurodevelopmental Disorders, people coming at it from the applied psychology aspect. We've got, I don't know if anyone's here today, but I'm trying to grab some of these people more into sleep than they are at the minute, but the Centre for Systems Modelling, Quantitative Biomedicine, and the Centre for Prison Rehabilitation for Spinal Pain, there are obviously aspects there where it's important to understand sleep, and certainly the Systems Modelling Quantitative Biomedicine is really trying to apply computational and mathematical approaches to understand EEG data and network modelling approaches to EEG data, which I think would be very interesting to apply in sleep disorders as well. And maybe that's something we can talk about later. The Institute for Data Science is in italics because as it only just exists. It's an institute that's being developed within the university. And again, I think the experience those people bring in terms of working with large data sets could be quite interesting to apply to some of the large data sets, I guess, that you have. We have a number of hospitals where people obviously are treated for various sleep disorders, and I guess Birmingham as the largest city in the region, at some point, if you have a sleep disorder within the region, you will be coming through one of these hospitals. We have people coming out of those hospitals with an interest in sleep research, so we do have the ability, I think, to access reasonably good size cohorts, maybe not as large as yours, but I think we do have the expertise across the range of sleep disorders, and we're working with other local universities and in terms of the sort of medical imaging, in terms of maybe EEG analysis or MEG analysis or fMRI analysis or structural MRI to just try and get, or bioinformatics to try and get as much as we can. And all the time I try to drag these people into sleep. Just say one quick thing about the links between, or the desire of Birmingham to be involved with collaboration with Brazil. That's been going on for quite a long time, and I personally had advantage of that probably for about 10 years when we were working around epilepsy with UNICAMP. Professor Fernando Sendes I've worked with for a number of years on the epilepsy side of things, but there's many other areas where the university is linking with Brazil, and it is really trying to build those links to make sure they are sustainable. We have a joint research fund with FESPA, which I've had access to before, and does help to kind of have workshops. It's not huge amounts of money, but kind of face-to-face workshops and trying to see what the next steps would be, it is useful for. And then we also do have the Brazil Visiting Fellows scheme, which can allow people to go one way or the other. Or maybe it can only allow, probably the clues in the name, it probably only allows Brazilians to visit the UK, but it does allow people to come here for a few months at a time. And if there's anything anyone either from the Sao Paulo end or from the Birmingham end wants to know about that, or any of the links with the Brazil Forum, probably Richard, who may or may not be here, but Flavia's certainly here and can say a bit more about that later. So it is a great pleasure. I mean, that's all I wanted to say, just for that little bit of context. I had the pleasure and the opportunity to visit the São Paulo Sleep Institute around about a year ago, and that was organised by Flavia, and was really eye-opening in terms of being able to see the facility itself and to hear about the number of beds that were there and the amount of work that was there and the data sets that were being acquired. And that's, why it's really nice to have these three speakers here today to tell us more about that and to see whether or not we can stimulate some collaborations going forward. So that's all I wanted to say. I will now pass over to Gabriel, if I can work out how to stop sharing, which I have. And Gabriel will tell us a little bit more about the work that they've been doing in Sao Paulo.
That's it. So let me know if you're able to see my screen.
Yeah.
Great. So first of all, I really want to thank you, Andrew, to thank Caroline and thank your whole research team, all the researchers that are listening us today. It's a very nice opportunity to try to establish collaborations, partnerships between our facility, our hospitals, our research team, and yours. So thank you very much for the opportunity. So the idea of this presentation here is first to introduce what is the Sleep Institute in São Paulo, how this facility has grown, what do it offers as of today, which are who are working with us, who are our researchers, and then we will focus on our epidemiological data. It will be like our highlights for today. So in order to begin our presentation, I just want Professor Monica to introduce herself, as she is the Director of Teaching and Research of the Sleep Institute. So I can start talking on our infrastructure and our facilities. So Monica, please, could you introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you, Gabriel, and hello to everyone. Welcome to this afternoon that we are going to share as much as we can. Thank you very much, Andrew, Caroline. And what we would like to, this 10 years of collaboration, we have another 10 years. So what you could imagine of Sleep Institute being providing any data or any new studies that we can do, it would be our great pleasure. I am biomedic as a background, and I've been director of the Sleep Institute for some years, and I am glad to be here today. Thank you very much.
So from the perspective of the infrastructure and the history of the Sleep Institute, I want to contextualize our work, first saying that the Sleep Institute is part of a higher organization named AFIP, which stands for the Fund of Research Support. That's a very clear name saying what it does. That's a philanthropic agency that supports research from basically researchers from the Federal University of São Paulo and other related institutions. But that's an organization, a private philanthropic organization that is behind the Sleep Institute. If you see most of the researchers at the Sleep Institute, they are also affiliated to the Federal University of São Paulo, but you have to make clear that the Sleep Institute and the Federal University of São Paulo are two organizations that set apart. They are not the same thing, but they share the same researchers and the same staff. So about the Sleep Institute, it was founded in 1992, and nowadays it is established as a reference sleep center in Brazil for sure, the biggest one. In Latin America. We have basically no competitor in terms of size and relevance of our work. So we basically work on research, diagnosis, treatment, and every possibility within sleep disorders. Here you can see one of our bedrooms in the Sleep Institute. You see that like this one, our main facility has other 70 polysomnography beds. So our whole capacity are more or less 81 polysomnographies per day or per night. That's a nice comparison if you see that the Stanford Sleep Medicine Clinic, in which the whole sleep medicine history has begun, they have 13 beds as of today, and we have like 70. This is important if you consider how important sleep medicine is in Brazil. I'm not aiming to say that we are more important than Stanford. That's not the point. I just mentioned that sleep medicine has become very important in Brazil in terms of public concern. And our epidemiological studies were some of the reasons why sleep medicine has left a medical discussion to a public discussion, and now everyone is aware of the risks of sleep deprivation, sleep apnea. In every newspaper, in every television show, you will have discussions about it. So over these 70 polysomnographies a day, we have 13 polysomnography rooms which are exclusively dedicated to research. So 72 to clinical work and 13 to research. We have this is the facility in which our research polysomnography beds are located. So we have a little smaller structure here if you compare to the other facility. We have some labs for preclinical research as well. So we don't work only with clinical sleep medicine, but also with preclinical research, in which we have labs for sleep recording in both mice and rats. Sleep deprivation with various techniques to perform it mainly with rodents, and also a lab that allows us performing intermittent hypoxia models, which is the best way to model sleep apnea in rodents. From a diagnosis perspective, we have another unit in which we have 5 floors dedicated to sleep medicine. So this is the building in which Andrew was last year, the building in which we met. Here we have 5 floors to sleep medicine, 3 for regular polysomnographies, 1 for pediatric sleep medicine, and another 1 for other related tests and to our staff. And we also have a private sleep clinic, which is more for clinical consultations and so on. In terms of education, the Sleep Institute in Brazil stands as the institute that more contributes to generate a qualified board of medical doctors and other health professionals in the whole country. So as of today, we have had more than 2,000 medical doctors that have acquired some degree with us. Our multi-professional courses are also very relevant as well. We have basically one program or one course for each health profession that has some relation with sleep. So we have programs for odontologists, psychologists, speech therapists, which is very interesting nowadays. The speech therapists are gaining more and more field in the treatment of sleep apnea. So we do focus very much on education, and Monica is the director of teaching at the Sleep Institute. So to summarize our facilities, we can say that, I don't mean to say in terms of relevance, but in terms of size of our work, we are the world's largest sleep institute. We have a database of more than 350,000 polysomnographies. We can, and we actually used to do before the pandemic, more or less 81 tests per day, 81 polysomnographies a day. And we count with a very multidisciplinary team composed by experts in sleep medicine from various levels and backgrounds. So now I would like to change the topic and bring the discussion to who is this team? Who are these experts who make the Sleep Institute in São Paulo so strong in terms of medical tasks and research. So I would like to bring Dr. Dalva Poyares, our clinical director, so she can introduce herself, and we can now discuss our research fellows, our publication output, and so on. So Dr. Dalva, please.
Thank you, Gabriel. Nice to meet you, Andrew, Sarah, and everyone, Richard, and happy to be here. And yes, I understand the point Gabriel just raised, that we do have the infrastructure, and now I'm going to present to you more than the human resource or even potential human resource. My name is Dalva Poyares, and I'm associate professor at Psychobiology department. And we have the Sleep Medicine and Biology division inside the department, and we call discipline, but it's a sleep division, which aggregates clinical and basic research, even in the UNIFESP. And I think it's Federal University of São Paulo. I think it's relevant to say that the AFIP and Sleep Institute, they are major founders, they give funds to the this department. How can I explain that? It's like there is an agreement, research agreement, and the main funds come from Sleep Institute to provide psychobiology department. I think it's pretty much it, right, Monica? Have I explained it? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I was involved in the Brazilian Sleep Society, and now I'm more involved in the World Sleep Society. We are writing guidelines and organizing meetings. And well, I got also the American Sleep Board for sleep medicine when I was there, and I was working a little bit. I had my postdoc in Stanford. So can you thank you. So I'm going to present here our, this is, Sérgio Tufik is the president of AFIP, which is the big umbrella inside the Sleep Institute and other, you know, there is a division for cognition, but now we are going to focus on a Sleep Institute, and he was obviously the founder and is still current president of Sleep Institute. He retired from the university, and he's dedicating more time to Sleep Institute, and he has been for a while one of the, you know, like here, he is publishing a lot. And I think this is very much because of his capability of engagement with people that are committed to the sleep field. And that's why also he, like our, you know, our dear Guilherme, you know, that I think Sergio has pretty much the same profile of aggregating people, and he is able to put us together, as you see. Can you change the slide? So this is the research team. I show you, you know, Sibeli is a dentist specialist, and she is interested in studies with bruxism. She has a current collaboration with Gilles Lavin. I don't know, Gilles Lavin. I don't know if I say it in French or in English. It's Lavin. Anyway, and Fernanda, she is also increasing her publication, and she's doing some effort in, she's an ENT specialist, and she's doing some research on surgical approach on SDB, sleep disorder breathing. And Gustavo is very bright, and he's a pediatrician. He's also a clinical director, not only of the clinic, but he runs a facility dedicated to neuromuscular disease and ventilation. So it's a very good of patients and well, research. And myself, I'm a neurologist, and I'm involved in pretty much all sleep disorders. I do more clinical and epidemiological. I help Monica and Gabriel whenever I can, and we do have some publication in epidemiology together. Morgadinho, he's a neurologist. He's very focused on excessive daytime sleep, better saying CNS hypersomnia. He's very much focused on narcolepsy. Helena is a gynecologist, and it's funny because she was the first sleep specialist, gynecologist, sleep specialist, and she is focused, her focus obviously is in sleep disorders in women throughout lifespan, either pregnant or menopause. She's more interested in menopause, but any type of, can you, next please? Thank you. Lisha is more an assistant research. She is interested in headache and in general population, You know, she is searching for the correlates of headache and the relation with sleep disorders from baseline and which was 2007, and the follow-up 2015. She's finishing writing these. She's more, her main interest is headache. Luciana Lombini is well connected on upper airway resistance syndrome. I think one of the main publications in the upper airway resistance syndrome was with her. And she was working also with Christian Guilleminault before. And Dr. Maluli, he's also interested. He's has published and he's helping supervising students interested in working with bruxism. He's also collaborating with Lavin in Montreal. Luciani, she's a pulmonary physician, very much interested in SDB, but she's more engaged in clinical aspects. Like Lydia, she would feel, I think she would feel more a profile of assistant research, not really those who write papers, but she's doing a very good job in collecting data. And here, sorry, we made a mistake here, is Ronaldo Piovesan. This is Ronaldo. Ronaldo is also a very bright guy, and he is now a professor in our team, and he's very much interested because he's a geriatrician. He's interested in all sleep disorders, and he has published some interesting papers on sarcopenia and body composition aspects and sleep metabolism in the elderly. So which is a very interesting research subject. And Sonia is a pulmonary physician. She is very much interested in obesity. She was in people who underwent bariatric surgery and had sleep disorder, and those who had not. And she now is working for the clinical department. And we do have more people interested in genetics. And we have Professor Dalmeida, and one of Sergio Tufik's students. They are able to run genetics, and they are very much interested. Dalmeida is now very much interested in chronobiology, and she likes rhythm, and we are equipped with actigraphy. We can, not more than that, but actigraphy, and we do have, she has in her team people who are very much interested in collaborating in studies with chronobiology, like we do too. But I think she's having more these, she's more in charge, and she's doing her best effort to aggregate people on chronobiology. So this is just a little bit of history. This is the first paper, scientific paper, and it was, as you see, 1978, and has a lot of citation, you know, not only because it's old, but because it was, by that time, it was a big discovery, the relation of REM sleep and dopaminergic system. And this is how the group is performing. And we had a peek here. And thank you, Gabriel, for writing this out, because we had a very big grant, which is called CEPID grant from FAPESP, as you just mentioned. And with this grant, we were able to, it was a big boom for us. And we could improve our, not only our facilities, but our, not only the infrastructure, but also the human resource. We were able to aggregate nice people, as I mentioned before, in our group. And now we are a multidisciplinary approach. Now I am also happy that there is a psychiatry called Dr. Galderos. He just joined us, and he's working very close to Monica. Monica and himself are the chief. They are the chief of psychobiology department, and he's a psychiatry, and I hope he's increasing collaboration, and Monica is doing her best effort to aggregate psychiatrists in our team. And those are the main research fields that, as I mentioned. So the preclinical research, and Monica is the head of it, chronobiology and circadian rhythms, and Vania, Dr. Dalmeida is very much involved, genetics and molecular biology also, and SDB, sleep disorder breathing, we do have some people, including myself, sleep and cardiovascular system. We have also a cardiologist in our team. Sorry, it's so many people. I know it's becoming tiring saying, but I think it's important you to know that we do have also a collaboration with the cardiology division department in the Federal University of São Paulo, and Fatima, Dr. Sintra, she has been doing her best effort to publish with us in the latest years. Sleep and immunology, insomnia, which I like very much. We do have a collaboration with some psychologists. Sleep and menopause, I mentioned before, and aging, and dermatology is a research field that Monica was starting with in collaboration with dermatologists, sleep and sexual health, and sleep epidemiology.
Very nice. Thank you, Dalva.
Thank you. Sorry, so many people, and I don't want to forget anyone.
That's perfect. So this was for you and to the people who are listening to us, that to explain that we have a very multidisciplinary team, a very broad team in the sense that we cover most medical specialties and also non-medical health professions as well. So we cover since the most the ones you first thought when you think of sleep medicine, so neurology, pulmonology, cardiology, but also we have geriatricians, cardiologists, pediatricians, and gynecologists in our team. So what we aim to do is to have a very, very broad coverage of sleep medicine. But from now on, we will focus on our epidemiological research. So our biggest epidemiological study that we have been conducting since 1987 is the São Paulo Epidemiological Sleep Study, for short, EPISONO. The word sono in Portuguese means sleep. So that's the epi sleep, so to say. I was the coordinator of the last edition of EPISONO, which took place from 2018 to 2019. But we will discuss our data since 87 and the methodological approach we have been developing since then. So the São Paulo Epidemiological Sleep Study, it had some previous editions in 87 and 1995, in 2007, and with a follow-up in 2015, in which we recalled all the participants from 2007. So basically you have a series of cross-sectional studies and also a cohort from the third edition. Most of these editions, not all, but most, since 2007, they all encompass type 1 polysomnography, a complete polysomnography, which makes EPISONO one of the biggest, if not the biggest, polysomnography-based epidemiological sleep study worldwide, in the sense that we have representative samples of a city which has, as of today, 12 million people, sorry, 12 million people. That's the size of the city of São Paulo. So with this framework, we can say that EPISONO is a very important project. It is unique in the sense that it is representative, it is population-based, and it represents a very cosmopolitan city. We aim to carry a new edition of EPISONO every 10 years. It varies a little bit, like every 11 or 9 years, more or less, but we try to do that every 10 years so we can have a picture of the city as it evolves. In '87, when we had the first edition, the city of São Paulo was more or less 7 million people. So we gained 5 million people in these 4 decades. And our results reflects this growth. So the way we aim to grow is more or less like that. We have new cross-sectional studies every 10 years. We might expect another one in 2028. And we have follow-ups from the 2007 edition, more or less every 8 years. So we had the first follow-up, the second wave in 2015, in which all those people were recalled. The people from 2007 were recalled in 2015. And there will be a third wave, which is planned to 2022. And this follow-up will probably continue as long as we have this population alive. That's a cohort. So we have a series of cross-sectional studies and a cohort that hopefully, if there is funding for that, we will keep as long as possible. So this explains our 2 goals here with EPISONO, which is to follow the city in the series of cross-sectional studies and to follow the population as it ages. So these are our aims with EPISONO. If we take the first 2 editions, 87 and 95, those editions had no polysomnography. For those editions, we had only population-based subjective sleep assessment. And when I mean subjective, I mean based on questionnaires. We have a questionnaire that was developed for that edition, which we call UNIFESP Sleep Questionnaire. It has no clinical value. It is only intended to dissect the complaints of the population regarding their sleep and also their sleep habits. So still today, we use this UNIFESP Sleep Questionnaire in the most recent editions in a way to ensure that the same questions that were applied in '87 are still applied today. These 2 editions had a very representative sample with 100 individuals calculated in a way to represent the population in terms of sex, age, socio-economical classes. So we can for sure say that this is a representative sample. These first 2 editions, they were performed more in a political sense in order to drive political policies in Brazil regarding sleep. So that was the main claim, that we should grow our sleep institute, that we should draw laws and regulation in Brazil regarding sleep disorders and how we should diagnose it in public health systems and so on. But we had only 1 publication from this first, from '87 and '95. We had some other publications with minor data, but this was the only bigger publication we had from those 2 the first and second edition. Then we should go to the 3rd edition, which is the paradigm changer here. But in order to contextualize that, I shall remember you of a very important sleep study that was published in 1993 in the New England Journal of Medicine by Terry Young from Wisconsin. That was probably one of the first epidemiological sleep study that tried to estimate the prevalence of sleep apnea. And it came to a conclusion that sleep apnea had a prevalence of more or less 4%. If we compare men and women, 24 in men with the hypopnea index higher than 5, but when you go to the clinical diagnosis, to the full diagnosis of OSA, it was about 4%. Why is this the background? The background can be explained by the experience of our clinical and research staff, and mainly by the experience of Dr. Sergio Tutic. The idea was that we had a sleep institute in Brazil with 4 floors, at that time, more or less 60 polysomnography beds, which were filled every day, every year. So I was barely born at that time, but Sergio thought that, look, something with a prevalence of only 4% wouldn't ever fill all our beds. So this prevalence shall be higher than 4%. So the 3rd edition of EPISONO was designed to calculate the prevalence of sleep apnea on a better methodological framework. So we had, for the first time, EPISONO with polysomnography. We had a sample of 1,042 subjects ranging from 20 to 80 years old from all districts in the city. And all of them were brought into the Sleep Institute and they had underwent a polysomnography and a whole set of additional tests and biochemical tests and so on. So then we came to the paradigm shift, which I mentioned before, which was just to continue, we had a follow-up of EPISONO 2007 in 2015, which a follow-up rate of 67%, which is pretty good considering that we had an interval of 8 years from one to another. So which was the paradigm shift here? As I mentioned before, the best data we had before EPISONO was that OSA prevalence was of more or less 4%. With EPISONO, we saw that 32.9% of the city of São Paulo had sleep apnea. We should obviously consider that mild sleep apnea is among those 32%, and mild sleep apnea is something to consider regarding treatment and if this is actually something that deserves clinical relevance. But in any way, that's sleep apnea, and this mild sleep apnea was also counted in those 4% of very young. So that's, and I acknowledge that it is strange to jump from 4% to 32%, and the reviewers also acknowledge this huge difference, and it was very hard to publish this data. Not only because of those numbers, but unfortunately because it came from a non-standard research country. Regrettably, we heard from one of our reviewers on a big journal. I don't remember if it was The Lancet or BMJ or something like that, because we tried the bigger journals as we understood this is a shift, a paradigm shift. And we heard that from one reviewer, something like, we won't trust this data as long as it is not replicated by an European country or the US. It was pretty sad. And then we ended up publishing it at the Sleep Medicine Journal, which is very nice. That was a very reputable sleep medicine journal. As you can see, another important result, which is like was already known, but the prevalence increases with age. As you can see, around the 20 to 30s, the prevalence is like about 7%. And when you age, it like almost anyone over 70 has some sleep disorder breathing. We had some nice data there in 2010 regarding the risk factors, but nowadays this is pretty well known. We don't need to dissect that with much more detail. So then in 2015, we were, let's say, post hoc rewarded when European countries start replicating those data. The most important one was a cohort in Lausanne, Switzerland, called Epidemiological, which came to a proportion of a prevalence of 49% of men with moderate to high to severe sleep apnea. So even worse than ours. We have to consider that they employed a home assessment of sleep apnea. So we should consider some that these data are not that precise, or at least not as precise as ours, but In any case, that was the first time we had similar data. And after this one, we had some nice replications in Australia, in the US, in India, in Japan. And it ended up with this very important article that was published at the Journal of the American Medical Association I guess in 2018, sorry, I'm just trying to take this thing out of my screen. So this was published by a research group by Dr. Atul Malhotra, one of the most well-known pulmonologists in sleep medicine nowadays. And the conclusion in this meta research, basically he took every big epidemiological study about sleep apnea in the world, and he calculated the worldwide prevalence of sleep apnea, and he estimated that in about something about 45%. So nowadays, what we tried to prove there, like 13 years ago, 10 years ago, is a well-known fact. We're now trying to understand why sleep apnea is so prevalent, because from a public health perspective, whenever you say any disease has a prevalence of a 30% in a population, that's something to care about. So we are not anymore trying to estimate prevalence of sleep apnea. That's a fact. We're trying to deal with it. So these are some figures from these studies showing which countries have the highest prevalences of sleep apnea. Look after yourselves that the UK is not on the most affected countries. And this is a heat map of the same data, basically. So going to, I just realized you're probably saying all those things in my screen, right? Sorry for that. So we also had some important data regarding insomnia. We tried to measure insomnia from an objective perspective, and we came to a prevalence of 32%. But we should say objective insomnia is something very debatable. Basically because what we call objective insomnia were polysomnography findings that are related to the insomnia diagnosis criteria. So we consider objective insomnia those guys that took more than half an hour to sleep, that spent more than half an hour awake during the night and things like that. But the point is that you cannot diagnose insomnia by a single night. So this is more like a research finding. If you go to clinical and epidemiological relevant data, we shall say that 45% of our sample have insomnia complaints, and 15% of them have insomnia according to the criteria by the DSM-4, which was the version in place at that time. So now you can see how much of a problem it is sleep disorders are in Brazil. You have sleep apnea with a prevalence of 30% and insomnia with a prevalence of 15%. And obviously there is some overlap between those two. Another important data is about overall sleep complaints. And we see, comparing now the 3 editions of EPISONO, that every complaint are increasing. If you see, and now these are very subjective complaints. That's how the patients refer to them. If you see snoring, it has increased from 21% in '87 to 41% in 2007. Nightmares, somnambulism, daytime sleepiness, all of them related in some extent to stress. It has increased, like nightmares from 11 to 24, daytime sleepiness 4.5 to 8.6. Everything is increasing. If you go to the insomnia symptoms, sleep onset insomnia, it grows from 13% in '87 to 25% in 2007, a very linear growth. But if you see early awakening symptoms, we have a geometrical growth from 10.6 in '87 to a quarter of our population in 2007. What explains why the São Paulo population is sleeping so poorly? There are basically 2 explanations. The first the people in the city are more and more anxious, submitted to stressful situations, things like you see in many big cities. And there is another thing. The city has grown, as I mentioned to you, like in 5 million people over the last 3 decades. So as long as the city grows, and basically the city of São Paulo is bigger than several European countries. Our city is bigger than the whole Netherlands as a comparison. So the bigger in a much smaller area. So the bigger the city gets, people are living far from the downtown, far from the big center. They are spending more time commuting, and then they are awakening earlier. And I know this is not a symptom of insomnia, awakening earlier because you have to commute, but the people refer early awakenings not regarding only insomnia, but also regarding insufficient sleep syndrome, which is basically I don't have time to sleep. In any case, what we see, any kind of sleep complaint is growing and is getting more common as time goes by. Excessive sleepiness is also something very common here. We have a person, more or less, almost 40% of the population diagnosed with excessive daytime sleepiness by the Epworth Sleepiness Questionnaire. We have now some data regarding other sleep disorders. About narcolepsy, you cannot come into a prevalence, estimated prevalence to narcolepsy based on 1,000 individuals because it is too rare to be seen in 1,000 individuals. But we can estimate the prevalence of epilepsy symptoms. So the biggest one, excessive daytime sleepiness, cataplexy, sleep paralysis, and hallucinations. They have a reasonably common prevalence. And when they are combined 2 by 2, you see that the prevalence is not negligible. That's something to really consider. Obviously, this is not narcolepsy, but this is the association of narcoleptic symptoms. Regarding bruxism, you can see that bruxism affects our population in almost 10%. And this is closely related to anxiety and to stress. This is not new data, but this is one of the very few studies to estimate the prevalence of bruxism based on population-based samples. So the biggest achievement here is not the numbers we got, but how we got those numbers. So we are not dealing with a clinical sample. We're not dealing with a convenience sample. We are dealing with a population-based representative sample, which basically confirms previous data, but gives power and gives a strong evidence to those numbers. So those are the biggest prevalence studies. But beyond those prevalence studies, we have a huge and very rich database in which we can analyze the combination of several variables. So the possibility is huge for new studies on our database, always with the benefit of being population-based. So you can see that we have studies like this one from Dr. Fatima Sintra with the association of Framingham risk score and sleep, so sleep and cardiology. We have a study about depression and sleep, headaches and sleep. This one regarding genetic ancestry and the risk of sleep apnea, something that you can only do something like that on a population-based study. Inspiratory flow limitation, which is something very close to upper airway resistance syndrome in a population-based study. This is a very nice improvement regarding previous research because this disease, which Dr. Glemno tried to establish for his life, was never tried before in the population, always in clinical samples. The prevalence and the relationship in a population-based regarding sexual dysfunction and sleep apnea by Dr. Monica Andersen. So the possibility with such a diverse database is huge. With that, now we can go into the 4th edition. And when I mentioned the 4th edition, I mentioned this one that took place from 2018 to 2019, and for which the data is about to be released. So which are the main features of this fourth edition? First, this is a representative sample again, based on a 4-staging sampling technique. How do you do that? First, you have to see which are the social districts in a city, or whatever name you have, neighborhoods, districts, boroughs, whatever. You have to map them and you select a sort of them. We have 96 districts in the city of São Paulo, and we selected 30. From these districts, you select the blocks. From those blocks, you select the houses or the apartments where people live. And from those houses and apartments, you select individual. In each of these steps, you have to make sure any selection is took place at random, is the random selection, which assures the randomness of our sample and also assure that it is representative. All those people, we were aiming to something between 700 and 1,000 individuals. All those people were invited to go to the Sleep Institute. They were actually brought into the Sleep Institute by our drivers. They had all the help and the assistance they need to go to the Sleep Institute, because as this is a very big city, we don't want people to commute to go to the Sleep Institute. We bring them by our drivers there. All of them underwent a polysomnography, type 1 polysomnography, with some extra features, like all of them had, additionally to the regular polysomnography, a masseter electromyogram for bruxism, which you don't have in a regular exam. All of them had 4 arms electrodes for electromyogram, so we can establish the prevalence of arm movements among those with leg movements, something that it is important to establish the whole clinical profile of someone with movement disorders, sleep movement disorders. And also, whenever they come to the Sleep Institute, they underwent a whole set of complementary tests and exams, not only the polysomnography, but biochemical tests, anthropometric measures in body composition, actigraphy, cardiovascular evaluation, and spirometry. So we are not only able to diagnose sleep, but the relationship of sleep disorders and other clinical features. So this edition of EPISONO took place from August 2018 to June 2019. We had available those 13 rooms, which were working every day. Obviously, we weren't able to have the 13 full dose during all those months. We take actually much longer than needed, because it was not that easy to select those specific people to come. This is the difference of a convenience sample in which anyone showing up is a participant. No, we had those specific guy coming from that district, that block, and that house. So that was the reason why it took so much. The exclusion factors were being pregnant or lactating woman up to 6 months out. 6 months out, I mean the child. Shift workers, people with disabilities that prevent self-care or communication. By that I mean people that can communicate and fill out a questionnaire. So there were no other exclusion factor, and non-Portuguese speakers. This was important because we were receiving some waves of immigration from other Latin American countries and African countries, and those people actually show up by mistake, but they are not able to answer our questionnaires, unfortunately. The research stages were divided into 4 steps. The first one, which we call pre-stage, a pre-stage, is the city mapping, in which we dissect how we will achieve those people, which are the district, blocks, and houses. Then the first step is a domiciliary interview. So one individual from our staff, actually from a pooling company, you know, those companies that do election pools, we hired one of those companies to interview people at home. So that was not our actual staff, but those hired people that went to the participants. First, they invited the participants, and then they applied the first set of questionnaires, which I will show you in a moment. After that, they were invited to go to the Sleep Institute, which we'll call the institutional interview, in which they underwent the polysomnography, a new set of questionnaires and some complementary tests. The third one is the in-home additional tests. So after the polysomnography, they go home, obviously, but they went home with a Holter monitor, with a BMP monitor, with an actimeter, and with some additional questionnaires. So we have a very comprehensive evaluation of these patients. Regarding the schedule, so here D means day. In the day one, they were interviewed at home, invited to come into the Sleep Institute. In day two, not a subsequential day here, the second day of analysis, but the time spent between those two might vary, depends on the availability of the participant. We had the polysomnography that night. Day three, when the polysomnography finishes, the guy receives his Holter monitor, a BMP monitor, which actually was performed with a single monitor able to monitor Holter and blood pressure, and the actimeter. At day 4, Holter and blood pressure monitor were returned. Day 13, the actimeter were returned with a sensing device in a partnership we had with them. And finally, sensing devices were returned, but those sensing devices are for private purposes. What exactly was measured and which tests took place at the institutional interview? So we had first when the participant came into our Sleep Institute. We took some photos, photos of the throat and the face, in order to measure anthropometric characteristics of the upper airway and related with sleep apnea. Anthropometric measures by basically neck circumference, waist and hip ratio, and so on, blood pressure, and then the questionnaires, which is a broad list of questionnaires I will mention in a moment. Tongue pressure evaluation. This is something of interest to our speech therapists and to our ENT professionals, for which we don't have many data regarding tongue pressure. We have data regarding tongue size, but not tongue pressure related to sleep apnea. Then a respiratory test, and then the PSG preparation. Then by the morning, the polysomnography was unset. We took a urine sample, then blood pressure, a blood sample, to several biochemical tests I will mention in a second, spirometry by the morning, then the Holter and ABMP. We had some specific tests for the elderly, those over 60 years old, and then the guy was just, the participants was discharged. Which were the questionnaires we applied here? At home, in the domiciliary interview, the home interview, we had the UNIFESP sleep questionnaire, which is the single one that has been applied since '87. So we can track the sleep in the population of São Paulo since '87 because this questionnaire has been replicated since then. Then you have the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index, Insomnia Severity Questionnaire, the Berlin Questionnaire. All of these are very traditional sleep assessments. Then at the Sleep Institute, you can see the whole set of questionnaires here, which covers most of the most reliable sleep questionnaires. So, and some very new, very recent ones, such as the Napping Behavior Questionnaire, but also Epworth one, diagnosis regarding the most recent criteria for insomnia, restless leg syndrome, and bruxism. You can see that those are the sleep disorders that doesn't need polysomnography. So basically a clinical diagnosis. Shoulder fatigue scale, morning and evening questionnaire, nocturia and nocturnal enuresis. That's a very new questionnaire we tried here. A overall health questionnaire, basically to see and to evaluate which clinical diseases the participants have and try to correlate it with sleep disorders. Anxiety and depression inventories, the back one. Male and female sexual functions. female health questionnaire, asking about pregnancy, number of a child, if they were in menopause and things like that. The Nordic musculoskeletal questionnaire, who called for quality of life, several questionnaires regarding ENT, so reflex finding score, ISAC for rhinitis, nasal obstruction symptom evaluation, a memory questionnaire, and 2 questionnaires for the elderly. So everything that we thought among our team that could be interesting to evaluate regarding sleep was inserted here. And then some additional questionnaires that were took back home by the participants, because we cannot insert those here because then the set will be too long. We sent home those related to psychological assessment of behavior and personality. So the Rosenberg self-esteem questionnaire, the Bus-Perry aggression scale, Barrett impulsivity scale, perceived stress scale, smartphone addiction inventory, and 2 questionnaires regarding pediatric population. We don't have pediatric population in EPISONO. We're aiming people from 20 to 80, but we ask people with children to fill those questionnaires, so we can correlate the sleep in the parents with the sleep in the child. All of these questionnaires were applied by trained psychologists. We had a team of psychologists which underwent a very specific training, and we use REDCap as a platform to cover and to store all these data. Those are the biochemical tests we perform with those blood samples. You can see that this is a very comprehensive assessment in some very traditional parameters and other very experimental ones. So basically, whatever clinical and whatever metabolite, hormone you can think of, we try to estimate it. So lipid profile, hepatic profile, electrolytes, sexual hormones, cardiovascular risk assessment, and things like that. Urine analysis, breast tests for allergy and rhinitis, and a GWAS assessment, which allow us to have a genome-wide analysis correlating it with sleep. So this finishes my presentation here, and after that we can discuss some opportunities. But my intention so far was to show to all of you what we have been doing in the São Paulo Sleep Institute. First, what is the São Paulo Sleep Institute? How it has been growing? Who are the people that composes our research team? Professor Dalva presented only those higher researchers, but as she mentioned, we also have the professors at the university, which are part of our researchers. We have the postdoctoral fellows, and actually we have a team of researchers which is composed by more of 30 people. So what these people can offer to the people of the University of Birmingham. So the opportunity we want to introduce here is the opportunity to establish partnerships and collaborations with researchers who can help us extract the best of our data. As you can see, we can establish and we can try and we can test several hypotheses with our databases. And all the databases from 87, 95, 2007, and this last edition, they served for, they are at the disposal of the researchers to establish any, to test any hypothesis related to sleep medicine in the city of São Paulo. So what we offer to eventual partners, a very huge and representative sample from a big city in a different country. That's a big benefit in comparison with other trials because it is representative. It is not a convenient sample. It is not a clinic sample. And a really representative sample is very hard to reach. We can count on our fingers those sleep representative samples, and we can offer offer for partnership the PSG data and the complementary tests. When we offer that for partners, for collaborations, what we are actually looking for, we are looking for some clever, important, interesting, relevant proposals, collaboration proposals. We want to go beyond a simple prevalence estimation, because this we can do by ourselves with our team. We want to go further. What you would think of, what you would do with such a rich database? Which kind of associations of two variables would you try to do? Which kind of follow-up from 2007 to 2018 would you do with this data? This should go beyond establishing prevalences. We could try and consider comparing São Paulo with other populations. If eventually you have some representative data in the city of Birmingham on the surrounding cities, something like that, we can compare the prevalence of this disorder in São Paulo with Birmingham. We can validate data of something in Birmingham with a population-based sample in São Paulo. We can compare populations with this study. And what we really look for is very innovative proposals of partnership, things like we don't have in our team. As any research team in the world, we don't encompass all the possibilities. We have a very strong clinical staff, but we don't have many biomedical engineers. We don't have data analysts. We don't have EEG analysts that can dissect data in things like, that are able to work with things like spectral analysis or RAM density, things that deserve data analysis and biological signal analysis in a deeper level. So with that, I can finish the presentation saying that I really much look forward to establish partnerships from our group with anyone in the University of Birmingham, or eventually with anyone listening to this presentation, as long as the partnership is of the interest of both parts involved. So the Sleep Institute has the interest of contribute to sleep research. We have the data, and now we have to look for who will work with this data on a higher level. So Dalva and Monica, do you want to add something to the presentation?
I could not add more. You did a great talk, and I think you covered the main topics from our group and our goals. So very nice, Gabriel.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you, Gabriel. I think it's interesting because hearing you talking, it reminds me how rich it was. You know how we worked with this nice data collection, and we also have the capacity to conduct or to collaborate in any clinical trial, and also basic research. But this is our main strength now. With the pandemic, we had to stop collecting other source of data, including clinical trials, and because of you know, the relative lockdown, and so we need to work with what we have because we have collected a lot. So certainly. And we also are open to collaborate with something you have or with your ideas. We present our ideas, but it could be, of course, mutual. If you are interested in something that we can help collaborate, it will be also nice.
For sure. So, Andrew.
Thank you very much for that. I have the same feeling that I had after I came to the Sleep Institute, and you told me some of this and about the amount of data and the sort of depth of the study and the studies that you'd had, the possibilities for this data. You know, it's just such an unusual set of data to have. And you know, with it being representative, with it being so large, with it having so many measures. I mean, I was trying to write down some of the measures as I was going along, and there's just so many things there that can really help to embed sleep in virtually any question, really. You know, there's so much richness there that I think there's so many opportunities. So thank you very much for that. I mean, it's a real eye opener to see how busy you've been over so many years, and to see how the institute has grown and how it's been able to be a success in acquiring all of this data.